This rifle had a lot of issues, but I bought it because it looked like everything was there that needed to be there, and most importantly, the receiver had not been messed with. It's very common for these sporterized rifles to have receivers that have been altered to accept a scope, and a lot of the Swedish M94s in particular had their receiver rings defaced by Interarms when they imported them back sometime, probably in the 1970s. Now, I was aware of some of the more obvious issues with this rifle before I bought it. Chief among them in my mind was that it lacked a rear sight. No problem with that. I ordered one as soon as I sent the money to the gentleman that I bought it from, and in case anyone was wondering, the person I bought it from received the rifle in this state. He did not sporterize it. A big issue that this rifle had was a lot of rust on the barrel, and it had a very weird pattern to it. To fix that, I essentially did, I guess, my spin on the old penny scraping trick, because copper pennies don't really exist anymore. I use a brass case, as brass, being an alloy of copper, just like a penny, is harder than the red iron oxide, but softer than the carbon steel and bluing. This allows me to sit there and scrape off the rust without fear of damaging and scratching up anything underneath. Plus, a good size case like the 6.5 case I'm using gives you a lot more to hold on to than a penny, and what I tend to do is either use the rim of the case or sharpen the case mouth with a case deburring tool and use that to scrape. In any case, I managed to get all the rust off the barrel, and underneath there was a mix of bluing and bare metal, but left this really weird pattern on it. Of course, the last and probably most obvious issue was that this rifle had a sporter stock, albeit a fairly nice one. Now, originally I was thinking I'd just keep this rifle in the sporter configuration for however long. I mean, it was still a very usable rifle, and the replacement rear sight I put on was actually dead on for windage adjustment, although shooting very high at 25 to 100 yards as these rifles typically do. In any case, I'd figured I'd at least put out a wanting to buy classified on a popular gun forum just to see what was out there as far as original M94 stocks go. I got a couple offers that I thought were asking way too much. I saw some reproduction stocks on eBay, but that was for the wood only, and that would also be an extremely costly endeavor. Eventually, I got a message from a guy who was like, "Hey, I've got a bunch of these just hanging around, but I'm on vacation. I'll be back home in a few weeks and we can discuss." I turned down another offer in the intervening time. Eventually, this guy comes back and messages me with a bunch of pictures of these different M94 stocks he has, and I pick out this stock here. He gave me a very good price for the stock, including shipping, and he sent it out in two separate boxes, one for the wood and one for the metal. Apparently, by doing so, it makes it easier to clear customs, as this was shipping straight from Sweden. The next day after getting the stock, I got to work breaking the gun completely down and cleaning it up, getting it ready to go in the literal new old stock. This was when I started to notice some less obvious issues with the gun. For one, just trying to do a test fit, the nose cap would not go over the muzzle extension. This was by far the most time-consuming part of the entire process. I sat there and filed for a couple hours until I brought the muzzle down the 60 thousandths of an inch or whatever I needed to come off. Overall, though, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and I managed to keep it looking pretty round. The reason why this muzzle extension is on there is because this gun was presumably imported when, according to the NFA, a rifle with a barrel of 18 inches was considered a short-barreled rifle. Normally, the Swedish carbines had a barrel length of 17.7 inches, so what importers did was weld on this little extension to bring it up to the legal 18 inches. Of course, nowadays, 16 inches is the legal barrel length for a rifle, so I could cut this off at some point, but I think I'll leave it for now, especially since it serves as a nice point for me to hang it up on the wall. Another issue I started to notice was that the rifle didn't feed the first round very well, and I figured that was because of the sporter stock and how it fit against the magazine and the receiver. But when it was in the military stock, it had the same issue. I assume a previous owner may have modified the underside of the receiver in some way, or maybe it was even manufactured wrong from the factory. But when the magazine is all the way seated, it leaves a little lip that hangs out which the follower would catch on for the first round. To fix that, I filed down the back of the magazine well so that it was no longer a 90-degree angle and was more of a taper. And I filed in a matching taper on the bottom of the follower, so now the rifle feeds the first round fine as well as accepts stripper clips, which before it couldn't do. Another thing was the follower was modified so that the bolt would ride over when the magazine was empty. Unfortunately, he did a pretty poor job, so since the follower was already ugly, I went ahead and finished the job for it. I filed it down and also filed a central groove for the bolt to ride in, and now the bolt rides over the follower when the magazine is empty. Another minor issue was the handguard ring was a little bent, as they often are, so I hammered it back in shape. At this point, I was coming to a close with this rifle. I put it back together in its military stock, which, by the way, fits incredibly tight. I'm very excited to see how this shoots with such a tight-fitting stock. And this rifle has a pretty nice bore despite the outside of the barrel getting pretty rusty. The only two things left to do were to file down the butt plate and fashion a sling. The sling was pretty easy. You just cut the end of a normal rifle sling and thread it through the stock with a small hole for the buckle. I also took the opportunity to rub the whole thing down with oil to darken it up a little bit, and this is a reproduction sling. For the butt plate, I scribed a line with it attached to the stock, removed it from the stock, and filed it down until the line disappeared. I did 2 fittings like this until I got the butt plate where I wanted it, that is, with just a little bit hanging over to protect the wood. And that's it. I don't think I care too much to correct some of the remaining issues with this rifle, chiefly the discoloration, partial bluing on the exposed portion of barrel, the muzzle extension being in the white, the muzzle extension being there at all, or finding a replacement follower. In fact, I actually kind of like the weird discoloration, partial bluing pattern on the barrel. It kind of looks like a Call of Duty skin you'd unlock or something. Thanks for watching me bring this 127-year-old Swedish Mauser back to a fully functioning status and restoring it to its original military configuration. Look out for more of this rifle and for more of my content. Thanks for watching.